What up, Vibers? It's your boy Kai. Welcome to another episode of the Vibe with Kai podcast. Today, I have special guest Sara Avery. Sara is a guide and an expert in Quanta Change, a process that helps people remove negative patterns from their life. With nearly 20 years of experience, she has changed many lives, including her own. Sara has helped people feel better and live happier lives by unlearning bad feelings from their past. In this episode, we're going to dive into Sara's journey, explore what Quanta Change is, and learn how it can help you too. So sit back, relax. Let's get ready to enjoy some inspiring and uplifting stuff over here. Sara, hi, welcome to the show.
Kai, thank you so much for having me, and thank you
Yeah.
for everything you do just to uplift mental health. I so appreciate you.
Oh, I really do appreciate that. I have a good time like working on all this kind of stuff because I get to meet people like you who are just bringing such interesting, cool things that I would have never heard of, I never thought of before, and I get to meet people like you that are bringing stuff like this to the table to help so many people. So I want to dive deep into that because I think it's fascinating
Wow.
what you have here. So I want to start with you first, just as a human being. If you don't mind, can you share a bit about your personal journey and what led you to discover and eventually guide others through the quanta change process?
Absolutely. I was in my late 20s and I was living out my first career as a professional violinist. I had 2 degrees in performance, and I was at my summer
Nice.
gig at the Aspen Music Festival. And I met this new friend, and he was telling me about this research that he had been part of, participating in. And he said it really changed his life, and it sounded intriguing. And so I called up the founder and principal researcher of this work. Her name was Mimi Herman, and asked her about her work. And I started to get really excited because I had been pretty miserable, very miserable since
Hmm.
probably early teens, and severe depression, some anxiety, some big self-worth issues that all now I understand came from a really traumatic childhood.
Yeah.
I didn't know at the time, and so as I was listening to her talk, I had been doing some meditation work and some other self-help work to try and feel better. And I felt like I was like, hitting a wall. And so as she told me about her research, I thought, wow, she might have the way like through the wall. And so I started in, and within a matter of months, I felt better emotionally than I had really ever. And I felt like stronger in myself than I really ever had. And then what was a big surprise was that long-standing symptoms of endocrine dysfunction in my body that I had been researching for a long time, trying to find an answer to, those symptoms resolved. And I had those symptoms going back into elementary school age.
Hmm.
And so, it was a really weird time for me because I thought I was going to be a violinist forever,
Sure.
but I was burning out on that career for a number of reasons, unfortunately. And so I was thinking about what I want to do next. And people heard me rattle off all this stuff I learned about the endocrine system and said, you should go be a doctor. And I was like,
Yeah.
not going to medical school. No way.
That's a lot. It's expensive. It's so many years
Oh,
of
yeah.
work. Oh, I get it. Yeah.
It's so much. And then other people were like, well, you're a good listener. You should go get a PhD and be a psychologist. And I was like, not going to that school either. No way, not doing it.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, here's this work that helped me kind of across the board. Maybe I could do this. And so I asked the founder sort of sheepishly, I'd like to learn what you do. And she said, yeah, that's great. And so I moved to Kentucky because I'm a musician. So I moved where the teacher is. You know how that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And started sitting with her and learning and absorbing what she had learned in 20 years of research and learning how to guide people. And I eventually helped her refine the process, sat with her for 5 years and worked side by side to really understand it. And now I've been actually, I think my website's not up to date. I've been guiding people through this process for 23 years
Amazing.
and refining it ever since. Mimi died, unfortunately, in 2007. So this is really kind of my baby now.
Yeah.
And it's just a great joy in life to really help people feel better. So
Right.
that's how I got here.
That's amazing. And so when you first heard about quanta change, you were skeptical about it. What at what point and we're going to get into what exactly it is in a minute. But at what point were you like, okay, wait, no, I believe in this. This can be effective for myself and other people.
Yeah, I think it's when I started to notice that I really felt different without
Sure.
working at it. Like I just all of a sudden, like I remember this person that I really liked and I felt like really dependent on like getting his approval and him liking me. And all of a sudden when I felt like, huh, I don't really care so much
Mm.
about getting his approval. And that felt so different. And I didn't have to work at making that happen. I just felt that way. That's when I was like, maybe she's got what she says she has. Yeah.
Right, right. That's incredible. So let's get into like what it actually is. Let's understand the quantum change. So for those of the people that are watching, that are listening right now, that are new to this entire concept, can you
Yeah.
explain what quantum change is and how it differs from traditional therapy and other self-help methods?
Absolutely. So, Quanta Change is an alternative therapy that works with the brain during sleep. And what they found through the research was that you could permanently peel off layers of the source of our negative patterns. So, in how we feel mentally, emotionally, physically, negative patterns in our relationships, negative patterns in how we achieve goals in our work, career, school, negative patterns in just kind of everyday life, how our lives feel to
Mhm.
us, how they work, and like what we're here on the planet to do. And so perfect question, like how does it differ? And so I'll tell you what's similar about it to maybe traditional therapy first is that one component of the work is that you work with me regularly in sessions
Mhm.
that are quite a lot like a therapist session. You
Right.
share what's going on with you, your frustrations and what you want to change. And then the other similarity is that just like psychology does, Quanta Change understands that the source of our negative patterns really gets put into place early in childhood, before we have any choice in the matter. And it sort of like becomes kind of like the blueprint or part of the blueprint or the software that our lives are running on.
Right.
So that's the similarity. There are a couple of ways in which it differs. So the first is instead of working through the rational brain to manage negative patterns, Quanta Change is working with the brain during sleep to get to the storage bank of how we feel about being ourselves and to get to where that negative pattern is stored. And so then the other, and really by tapping into the brain's natural recharging process during sleep, we can really peel off layers of that source. And as we do, like the intensity of those negative patterns and the negative feelings, the intensity comes down, sort of like turning down the volume on a radio where the
Right.
song gets softer and softer and further away. And then the other difference, really, and this is what I've been hearing from my clients for many years, especially the ones who, have done years or even decades of therapy and other work on themselves. They come and they say, wow, I feel different. The outcomes here feel different to me. So, instead of having to catch yourself in a negative pattern and kind of stop that and go through some steps to feel better or reframe or behave differently, people just find themselves feeling different,
Mm.
behaving differently, and even having things in their lives work differently without that kind of Herculean effort that
Sure.
they'd been putting in before. So that's really how it different. And sometimes they don't even notice that change has happened. I
Yeah.
often am pointing it out. So I had my very first client called me and said nothing happened. And she was working on this pattern of having more order in her life. She was
Hmm.
dyslexic. She never made it to work on time. She had a lot of clutter that she hadn't been able to address. And she says, nothing happened. And I said, well, tell me about, your last couple of weeks. And she said, well, I only got one part of my house cleaned out. And I said, well, wait, how many years has it been since you've done that? And she said, oh, wow, I can't remember. And then I said, well, what else? And she said, well, I did make it to work on time every day this week. And I said, really? And she said, that was weird. Oh, wait, except for the day I got there an hour early and reorganized the office before everybody else came in.
Wow.
And so we're just cracking up at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because we're like, wow, that was monumental. And she said, if we had made a list with those things on it, she never would have been able to do it. She'd been making
Right.
those lists for years. And so it's really interesting. So instead of working at it, and we tend to notice it when we work at something, if I build a house over here, I know it because I'm tired and sweaty and I
Yeah.
built a house. But what happens with Quanta Change is as we peel off layers of this negative feeling, this source of negative patterns, which Quanta Change calls learned distress. This is
Right.
the feeling that we absorbed very early in life that there's something wrong with us.
Yeah, I was going to ask
And
about that because I thought that was fascinating, like the idea of learned distress for in quantum change and how it affects our daily lives and if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, there are 6 types of learned distress that can manifest in people's behaviors and feelings, right?
that's correct.
Hmm.
Exactly. So these 6 patterns came out of the Quanta Change research. A lot of that research was focused around a scientifically validated personality tool that
Right.
actually they found measures learned distress, this absorbed feeling that there's something wrong with us being just the way that we are, and the ways that we survive with that negative feeling. And so these 6 patterns, I'll name them because everybody wants to know what pattern
Right.
they are. So they're called the idealist, the perfectionist, the optimist, the caregiver, that's mine, the defeatist, and the dictator. And
Hmm.
so each of us has one or maybe a combination of these patterns. And what the pattern shows us is the negative ways we feel about being ourselves and how we store that. Do we really, really feel I don't matter, I don't fit, I'm not good enough? Or do we keep those feelings buried? And then it also shows us the way that we survive with the negative feelings. So, do we seek approval? Me,
Hmm.
do we try and be perfect? Also, me, do we, do we
I'm the
really
same
have
way.
yeah. Do we conform to other people's way of doing things? Do we have to keep everything under control? So how we really survive with the negative feelings. And everybody, when they hear me talk about the SQ, they say this pattern is called the SQ, or the overall
Hmm.
tool. And they say, well, you can't put me into a box. I hate these personality tests. But this is just a box that our negative stuff fits into.
Right.
So the point of Quanta Change is to peel away layers of that to reveal our uniqueness, because
Hmm.
each of us is a unique expression of what Quanta Change calls well-being. This is the
Hmm.
feeling that we are just great being ourselves, that we matter just for being ourselves, that things can work well for us, that life can be good for us. And so as we peel away layers of learned distress, that core well-being, who we really are, gets to like expand and fill in the software, the blueprint that's really generating all the patterns in our lives. And so that's really the point of Quanta Change, is really to uncover our uniqueness. And so we feel better and things work better, and we feel like we just get to be ourselves, and instead of having to work so hard at
Right.
life. Yeah.
Right, right. You've had profound personal changes through Quanta Change, especially with the health issues that you talk about. Can you share, if you don't mind, a specific moment or breakthrough that stands out to you through your own journey?
Absolutely. So, okay. So, the biggest piece of learned distress that I have, I would say, is abandonment. Um,
Mm,
my dad died when I was 3.5 years old and left me with a mom who wasn't really set up so well to be a mom.
hmm. Yeah.
Bless her heart. And so abandonment feels, any relationship, especially with a man, ending,
Hmm.
and that included like a violin teacher who left my freshman year in college, and I just felt like this black hole opened up in front of me
Yeah.
when that happened. And romantic relationships and all kinds of relationships, especially with men. And what's interesting is a few years ago, so that would get triggered for me. It would
Sure.
get triggered and it would feel horrible. When it used to get triggered before Quanta Change for me, on a scale of 1 to 10, it was a 14. It lasted for
Mm,
months at a time. I felt like the only solution to how the pain I felt was to just not be here anymore.
yeah.
And um, So as I was unlearning layers of learned distress, it's like the volume is coming down of learned distress. So it would get triggered and it was like bad, but it wasn't as bad. And then a
Yeah.
few years ago, I went through a breakup, and on paper, that was probably the worst example in my life of that particular trigger.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was I felt awful some days. And like on a scale of 1 to 10, there were days that were probably hit an 8 or a 9.
Yeah.
But never for a moment did I feel like the solution was me not being here anymore. Not for a single moment. And so that was a huge, like, I knew that, and I knew that was coming, but it was really amazing to just see it in real time. I don't feel that way. And I remember how awful I used to feel, even just for a violin teacher,
Right.
leaving or something. Yeah.
Right. I, what I find really interesting about this is, like, listening to this, people might think like, oh, this is just like coming from somebody's brain and like blah blah, like the idea of this. But this is all grounded in scientific research, specifically related to quantum physics. So, like, how do the principles of physics apply to the human experience and
Yeah.
and the energy surrounding that? How does that apply for all of us people out there that might have issues connecting the two?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try not to wonk out here and bore everyone with physics. But really, there are basically three main laws from physics that really the founder of Quanta Change saw they govern how we become ourselves, the sort of nitty gritty of how we absorb that negative feeling early in life and how it becomes part of this sort of software. And then how our lives are really behaving. It goes back to that Sir Isaac Newton third law of
Mhm.
motion: for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
So we absorbed learned distress, that negative feeling came in, and now it's headed back out, generating the moments of our lives. And then the third piece of that is really the understanding of how energy is transformed. It can, we know this law, it can either be transformed into renewable or non-renewable energy. And so the research behind Quanta Change set about trying to figure out how you turn learned distress into non-renewable energy, like burning it
Mhm.
off in a fireplace. And so once you burn that log off, you can't use those ashes to make heat anymore. And so a great deal of the research was spent on trying to figure out how we work with the brain to burn off logs of learned distress
Yeah.
so that the brain can't use it anymore. And that's where that experience of, oh my gosh, I feel different, that desperate feeling for me, like people pleasing used to be like losing sleep, obsessing, just everything was about that other person and what I was going to get from them and how do I get that validation fix, right?
Right.
And just seeing that go away and feel like that's not there anymore. And it comes off in layers. It's not overnight, but as it comes off in layers, it's just less and less intense. And so they found that when you burn off layers of learned distress, then who you really are expands to take the place that the learned distress was sitting, and you just feel better. So I
Yeah.
hope that answers the questions about
Yeah.
physics without getting too wonky. Yeah.
Right. It's funny because I mean, I can there might I'm curious how you address potential skepticism, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring up the scientific side of it, because I'm sure that there is skepticism that you might hear from people and stuff like that, especially people that might be skeptical about the process of a process that claims to permanently remove negative patterns. How do you address those doubts and skepticism with, but maybe it's new clients or people that just have genuine questions about it? How do you address that?
Well, I think the first thing is I go back to the research and say that, there was a great deal of applied research that was watching people go through this sort of proto process and seeing that as they were doing that, that there was a repeating cycle of change. And that
Mhm.
repeating cycle of change is something that I walk through with my clients every day and I see. And I think the second thing about the skepticism is, to some degree, I can't really convey what it's like until people try it. And
Right.
so I really just invite people to try it. And I think that people have a sense for themselves if it's something for them or not. And
Hmm.
so I just invite people to give it a try if they really feel drawn to it. Or sometimes if people come in and feel really skeptical about it, I'll say, it's probably not for you right now.
Right.
But
Right.
usually as they start to walk through the process and notice it, they go, oh my gosh, this might really work. And then they get to a place where they're calling me and they're saying, I had so much Quanta Change this week. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I can't wait to tell you about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so now I'm curious. So like when people do like start the process, like you said, what are some common challenges that you hear that they face when they start this entire process of quantum change? What are some common challenges that you hear about?
Well, I think it kind of is across the board. So,
Yeah.
challenges in relationships. So, I would say the number one thing that I deal with every day, the biggest piece of learned distress that we all have is the feeling that we don't matter just for
Yeah.
being ourselves. And
Hmm.
the need to matter to other people because we are an interdependent species. We need each other, even we don't need to be with each other all day long
Hmm.
every day, but we need other people. And so the most fundamental need we have as humans is to matter. And so
Right.
coming in hearing, I'm not being heard, I'm not being seen, or challenges with the survival mechanism having shut down their visibility in a way so much to keep themselves safe because they don't feel safe. And so the brain says, okay, I'm not going to let myself be seen. And then they see things like, I can't get a job.
Mm.
And because I'm not being seen out there in the marketplace, even though they're trying to be seen, they're doing all the right things, and yet somehow they're not being seen. And so in that case, I'm thinking of a client where we started to work on just feeling safe, being herself in the world, being seen.
Mm.
And all of a sudden the job offers started to come in. She ended up with a job that was better than even anything she'd hoped for. So I think that I don't matter either on trying to be seen or being afraid to be seen is a big one, not being heard. Other things, I mean, just things that you would bring to a therapist: anxiety, panic attacks, depression was certainly a huge one for me. Perfectionism, people pleasing, feeling stuck,
Hmm.
feeling like there's something not moving in my life. And we can usually bring that back to a piece of learned distress, because what I'm doing is not looking at the maybe even a diagnosis, which, comes from a doctor or a psychologist who's able to do that. What I'm looking at is, okay, when they're describing what they're going through, how am I seeing that connect to their pattern of learned distress, how that shows us how they survive, and how can we then, what's the opposite of that? What would well-being look like? So well-being in the people pleaser space would look like, for myself, I know who I am. I am my own sustenance. I am my own foundation. I feel good just being myself and sharing myself with the world, and sharing with other people, instead of feeling like other people are my sustenance and I've got to get something from them and I've got to chase after them. And so I'm just helping them really tell their brain that this is the kind of well-being they want to experience. And that's what then communicates to their sleeping brain, hey, this is what I want to recharge with. Because
Right.
what's really happening when we sleep is how we feel about being ourselves is getting recharged. That's part of
Right.
sleep.
Can this be integrated with other therapeutic practices? And if so, how can they complement each other?
Absolutely. I have lots of clients who also say are going through couples therapy
Yeah.
or have a standard therapist. I have other clients who are doing all kinds of other things. I live near Boulder, Colorado, so I've heard it all.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
they're doing like body work or anything else, meditation, you name it. And absolutely, I think that in my experience, my clients, if they haven't come in doing some other kind of work, and some other kind of work would be helpful to them, very often it just pops up in front of them. They run
Hmm.
across something and they're like, hey, I think I'll try this. And it's the perfect integration for them. So I just work with them on that. And I have found it integrates really well with other kinds of work.
Okay, that's good to know because I know that's going to be something that people are also going to be thinking about, and how it could potentially like maybe mesh with things that they're already doing or things that they want to do, and that leads into my next question, which is quanta change in the long term, right? Right, like how it can play into your life. Is it one of those things that people will need ongoing guidance like for the rest of their life, or is the process self-sustaining after a certain point?
Yeah. So, what I have found is that people tend to work with me for a number of years, a few
Hmm.
years. Sometimes people, I don't know, I have clients right now who've probably been working with me for 10 years. Generally, people spend a period of time with me, maybe a few years, where they're really working intensely on the progress on the process, and then it just feels like it's integrated. They feel like they've gotten where they want to go with that. They feel
Hmm.
so much better that they're like, hey, I'll check in with you here and there. And maybe they do a check in here and there, but they're really kind of on their own. So it changes, but that's kind of an average experience.
Got it. I find it so fascinating that quanta change works during sleep. Like I
Yeah.
think that's just so unique to me. Like I think that's amazing. If you don't mind, can you just take a moment to can you just elaborate a little bit more on how sleep plays a crucial role in the process of quanta change and why it's so effective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what they were finding in the research was that the rational brain puts up when the rational brain is operating, which is including the time when we're awake, also when we're meditating, even or under hypnosis, the rational brain is still present. And when the rational brain is there, there's like a wall of resistance
Hmm.
to change, to this deep level feeling change. And so they knew they needed to get the rational brain out of the way entirely. And they finally realized, wow, sleep is the time when the rational brain is fully out of the way. And sleep is when our sense of self, like our storage bank for how we feel, is getting recharged, specifically during REM sleep when we dream. And so they said, okay, if we can tap into that natural recharging process, we can tell the brain what's been happening over time is that we've been recharging at night with the most intense way we feel during a day we just lived. So, you plug your phone into electricity. What we plug our brains into at night is how we feel during that day we just lived. And so they said, okay, what do we do to tell the brain, I don't want to recharge with this most intense negative stuff I've been feeling during the day? Because we tend to, psychology has this term negativity bias, that the
Right.
negative is what we tend to focus on. So how do we tell the brain, I want to recharge with feeling good, with my core well-being? And so they finally landed on, you need a recording playing while you're asleep that is a generic catalyst for change. It sounds kind of like a guided meditation, but it's
Mhm.
designed very specifically to tell your brain, I want to recharge with feeling good, not with feeling bad. And from that, and then some simple daytime work where you're telling your brain very specifically what you want to change, like my client with everything out of order. What we found was what they found in the research was this repeating cycle of change happens where you can see the effects of, like, oh, she wanted more order, or she wants to feel strong in herself. And that's what that daytime work is about. Very simple work. And all of a sudden, we see a cycle of change. Maybe we see some dreams that look like they relate to that. Dreams can be very weird, but sometimes
Mhm.
we can see the tie in. And then we see something happen, feeling different, things working differently, people treating us differently, that really ties into that change that we were looking for, that specific way in which we wanted to feel better, that we were telling our brains. So, does that answer your question about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know that there's going to be people that are listening right now being like, okay, I'm sold. What do I got to do?" So like if there's someone that's watching or listening right now being like, "Okay, what next? So what can I do to get started? What process should they go about getting started?"
Yeah, absolutely. So they're going to go to my website that I'm sure you put in the phone
Hmm.
notes, and so they're going to click on free report on my website. Anywhere on my website, you'll see it, and fill out this in-depth personality test that really gives us that pattern for learn to stress for you. So I'm going to graph your answers. It comes straight to me. It's completely confidential. And I'm going to graph it and send you a report with your pattern of learn to stress and a little bit about how people tend to see Quanta Change unfold when they have that pattern. And then I'm also going to offer them a free 30-minute call with me just to answer questions, to start to answer some of that skepticism, to answer what is this whole thing about. And I just chat with them and see where they are. And I evaluate too, and give them a real read. Like, do I feel like they're at a place from what they're telling me that Quanta Change would be effective? Or sometimes I'll tell people, what I'm hearing you talk about is not really what people who have success with Quanta Change tend to talk about. Usually it's somebody who comes in and says, everything's going great. I feel really great. It's just it's one little thing over here that I'd like to change. Can Quanta Change do that? And usually that's not the case. It's usually people who come in and go, I feel lousy in some way, or things are really not working. And I've tried and I need something to change. Those are the people who Quanta Change really works for. So go fill out the test, get your report, and we can have a little call about that if they like.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm going to, for all of you that are listening or watching right now, I'm going to include the link to Quanta Change in the description of this podcast. That way, all you have to do is click, visit the website, get some more information, and give it a shot. Like, kind of like what you were saying before. Give it a shot, just like any other therapeutic method. I mean, you never know. You never know. You might discover things about yourself that can really help push your life forward and help you address or manage some of the challenges that you face every day. I think something like this is truly fascinating. So, Sara, thank you for sharing this with the world, and thank you for taking time out of your day to sit and chat with me about this. And if you don't mind, as we wrap up, can you just provide some final words of wisdom or advice that you could share with the audience, especially for those that are feeling stuck in negative patterns and are seeking a way out?
Yeah, I think I have really two things. One is I want everyone to know that no one chooses to feel miserable. And if you're somebody who's heard people say, why are you choosing to be miserable, to be depressed, to be sick, to be in abusive relationships, I want you to hear me. No one chooses that. That's really just something that's coming from your learned distress. And just understanding that, I think, can be so helpful for everyone, either those people who are fielding that or those people who kind of look at somebody and think, wow, that's a lot of crisis. That's a lot of drama. What I want everyone to understand is that's coming from stuff that got put into place very early in childhood that nobody had a choice in. And the other thing that I want everyone to know is, sometimes people come to me and they say, this well-being thing, this uniqueness, I don't think I have any of it. I don't think it's in there, Sara. And I have had clients who have said that to me, and I know what that feels like. I know how it feels to be really miserable. And what I want everyone to know is that your core is that feeling of you really do matter just for being yourself. You really do get to be yourself. And there is good for you in your life. It really is in there. I promise.
I love that. That's amazing. Sara, thank you so much for sitting and chatting with me today. We're going to continue this conversation a little bit. We're going to play a little game called Would You Rather, and that's for the subscribers. So if you are not subscribed to my channel on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, make sure you go do so, because you're going to get a little special treat with Sara and I. I'm going to challenge her just a little bit with some fun questions of Would You Rather. So make sure you go check that out. Sara, thank you again for joining. Everybody else, if you want to learn about Sara and Quanta Change, again, I'm going to include the links in the episode description. So all you have to do is click and check that out. With that said, my friends, as always, much love, good vibes, and I will talk to you later.